Hello everybody, my name is Carolin Lusby. I am the chair of the Special Interest Group in Tourism. I am also involved with the Center of Excellence in Sao Paulo, where I help in the organization and offering programming for the students. And of course, I'm a member of the organization as well. I became involved in leisure through my undergraduate degree. I always loved working with people. I always loved tourism. One of my first jobs was as a tour guide. I did my undergrad degree at East Carolina University and really loved the idea of leisure. And then actually I became part of the cohort of the World Leisure Program in Wageningen, and where we got our degree in leisure and environments through the World Leisure Organization. So that was one of the first centers of excellence, I think, and it was a really amazing experience. So then I finished and I did my PhD at the University of Florida in tourism and the environments as well. I focus on marine tourism a lot. I'm a scuba instructor as well, and so fascinated about the industry. Good question. I think after COVID, the world really realized so many things about sustainable tourism, and it kind of shook up the research agenda, right? So with no departures, no flights, no people in hotels during COVID, I think we became aware of a couple of things. One is resilience, right? So that topic of resilience. What makes destinations resilient? What makes countries resilient? What makes people resilient, right? Through times of crisis became a huge topic, right? Super interesting. Like, how can we make it, right? How can we predict and how can we make it? How can we prepare? How can we be resilient as people and as destinations? So that is one of the topics. The other topics, I think, is the changing demand for travel, right? So people now travel more for well-being. They merge travel and work, right? A lot of people work remote, so they might do like longer stays and really engage more with the community. So even that definition of what does travel mean is kind of changing, right? What is tourism when you're kind of working remote as well? And I think that focus on well-being, on becoming well through travel, on using travel as a form to do good, right? There's new terms being coined, like regenerative travel. That's supposed to be good, not only sustainable, but actually make it even better than it was before, right? And so that's another term that has been coming up. What else do we have? Sustainability, of course. I think with over-tourism, we saw before COVID, destinations like Barcelona and Venice and Amsterdam complaining, too many tourists, places were being destroyed, right? And then all of a sudden there was nothing, and now they're rebuilding in ways where they're taking care not to have too many tourists, right? And so Venice, I think, has now whole entry form and a fee to come in, and they're supervising with cameras. And so as travelers also picking destinations where maybe it's not so overcrowded, I think that's also another big theme that's emerging in tourism studies. So Brazil is such a diverse country. There's so many ecosystems here, from the Amazon to mangrove forests to wetlands to coastline, thousands of kilometers of coastline, to deserts, to all sorts of ecosystems really that exist. So I think that is amazing. It's also a country that's really not on the map of most travelers in terms of big destinations outside of Rio and Sao Paulo. So that's I think an interesting thing. So, and one of the things that came up after COVID is, how can we choose destinations that maybe are not so overcrowded? And I think Brazil is one of those countries that should be on everybody's list, because it's not a mass tourism destination outside of Rio, I'm talking, yet, for international travelers, right? And it's a little bit harder to navigate because the infrastructure is just not there as it would be in other countries. Even like Thailand has a better infrastructure in terms of getting around as a tourist by yourself. So it's a little bit harder to navigate, but it's definitely worth it. There's so much ecosystems. There are community development things. There's community-based tourism. So I take my students to a small village where we do fishing, and there's no road access. This morning we went to a small community here in Pernambuco where there was basically people who are fishing the mangrove forest that they live in, and they're selling the oysters and the crabs. You'll see the video in a second. So there's a lot of community-based interests There's ecotourism here that's just amazing, bird watching, one of the best eco lodges in the world is in the Amazon here. So there's a lot of opportunity, and as travelers, I think we have a choice to find out where can our tourism dollars go to really support ecosystem conservation and countries where your dollars really make a difference. So I think Brazil in that way is amazing. So I think let's go to the video and check it out. World Leisure. So as part of the World Leisure board meeting and our stay here in Pernambuco in collaboration with SESC, we went to this small community, a fishing community that actually uses the mangrove to bring in income and use tourism as a good tool. So SESC collaborated with these ladies who are fishermen who basically take the tourists on mangrove walks. So we're gonna go check out what is happening here. So here in the small community, again, we collaborated with SESC. They live off the mangroves. Mangroves is a really important ecosystem, not only because 90% of the fish and wildlife in the ocean comes here to breed, right? So it's really important for young fish, as well as coastal protection. You can see how these, right, if an island didn't have mangroves and a hurricane came through, it would lose a lot of land, right? So we have the habitat for small fish, coastal protection, as well as really cleansing the water. So here we have one of our board members with one of the ladies here, and she explains how they just this morning found one of the crabs.
Ele gosta muito. É uma isca boa. É cheiozinho que vive no pau do mangue.
So here behind me you can see one of the other groups still going. The actual trail that is being done can only be done at low tide, so a group went out this morning to do that. But you can see the mangroves here, how they're wild, and what this community does is take people on a walk to show the mangrove ecosystem, to show all the different oysters, crabs that live here and how they catch them, and then also how they actually sell them and make local food out of them. So let's go see what this group here is about.
Joanne.
Yes.
Look. You see?
Oh, yeah. I know.
Qual o nome desse aqui?
Esse é o aratu.
Aratu. This is Aratu.
É, mas esse é bem pequenininho.
Tá bem pequenininho.
Esse é o baby aratu.
This is a baby Aratu. It gets
Baby Aratu.
Baby.
So I was explaining earlier to my students, actually I did a video, that community-based tourism 80% of the time fails, and it's such a good model of tourism because it is developed from the bottom up instead of top down, right? And a lot of times it fails 80% of the time. Why? Because small communities such as this one that we see here, if you don't have an organization like the World Leisure Organization or SESC, how would they have market access, right? It's impossible. The other one is financial viability, right? If you just rely on tourism, you would have to basically create a form of mass tourism to make enough money, so that's not. Now this community here actually still lives from its original ways of fishing in the mangrove forests. And thirdly, it's governments. So a lot of times the organization doesn't have the skills, right? So this community here, unless they have somebody who trains them in tourism how it works, the skills of actually managing a project like that are just not there. Also there could be troubles in terms of, if not everybody profits equally, right, in the community, that there might be some political things happening. A lot of times also what happens in community-based tourism, it starts off with an NGO actually building it up, and then once that organization pulls out, the local population is left without really much skills, right, and it kind of falls. So those are all the potential issues with community-based tourism. So we're talking about Brazil here because I grew up in Germany. I am based as an associate professor at Florida International University, right? But I have this collaboration with universities here in Brazil, and I also bring groups here. So it's a really interesting thing. So this question is actually super interesting. One of the things that fascinates me here is there's so much cultural tourism. So there is traditional communities such as the Quilombos, which are descendants of African slaves that still do a lot of resistance. So in Brazil, I think one of the things that really comes up when we talk about leisure is leisure as a form of resistance. So the Quilombo use, for example, samba, the dance of samba, and some of their traditional forms and cultural norms to resist what was happening and to resist that lifestyle of enslavement, and still practiced today. And still today it's being used as a form of resistance to make it through tough times. So that's one of the interesting things that I think culturally is fascinating. Of course, you have the Indian tribes. So one of my experiences was going into the state of Pará and working with the Kayapo and really looking at their lifestyle, and it's so fascinating how they use the forest and how they actually are able to protect their forest through it being tribal land that is not really being developed as such, because they're such good guardians of their resources, right, and the way they live and their tattoos and all of that. So there's just cultural diversity here. Also, Brazilians love to travel. There's a lot of domestic tourism. In fact, actually, domestic tourism brings in way more money here than international tourism, which I think is really interesting. They love any kind of social activities. Leisure is very social here, very outdoors, very connected, active as well. And I think that's for somebody who's coming from the outside, there's a lot to enjoy and a lot to feel kind of connected. Even if you're not really part of it, you kind of feel that connection when you're here. So I think that is one of the cool things.